Hello everybody and welcome to a comprehensive review of Nigeria's political culture and society by your host, Abdul-Salam. This video will attempt to cover Nigeria's political culture and society, as well as how Nigerian society is usually run on a day-to-day basis, and the basis for those runnings. Just as a quick recap of Nigeria's political structure, Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa and is the 7th most populous country in the world. It's also one of the most diverse nations in the world, with over 250 ethnicities and languages within its borders. It follows a system of a bicameral legislature and a president as an executive, who appoints a cabinet to help him run the day-to-day affairs of the national government. The legislature, which is split into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, serves for 4-year terms per person. Each legislator is elected by single-member districts, with the House of Representatives 360 seats having 1 seat per district, and the Senate's 109 seats are divided among 36 states with 3 states each, and the Federal District of Abuja with 1 state each. The president, however, is elected by a 2-round system to ensure that minorities get to voice their opinions. In the first round, the president must win 50% of the vote. In the second round, the president-elect must win 25% of the vote in at least 2/3 of the states. This was instituted to make sure that one minority does not take control of the entire country. Nigeria, unlike most of the other countries, has had not 1, not 2, but 8 military coups in the past, with only small brief interludes about 1 to 2 years of democracy in between. This has taken a great toll on Nigeria's people and their political culture as well. There are multiple ethnicities within Nigeria, but there are only 3 or technically 4 main. The first one is the Hausa Fulani, which are basically 2 ethnicities that have merged into one. Before Nigeria was colonized by the British, the Hausa and the Fulani both fought a war. After this war was over, they signed multiple peace treaties and agreements and intermarried multiple times, resulting in one single ethnicity that resides primarily in the north of Nigeria. This ethnicity, because of the spread of Islam, is primarily Muslim. The Yoruba people live in the southwest of Nigeria, near the port city Lagos and the former capital. They're primarily composed of 50% Muslim and 50% Christian, a 50-50 divide. The Igbo people live in the southeast of Nigeria, near the Niger Delta. They're primarily Christian. Almost due to this many ethnicities existing in Nigeria, and the fact that it's a centrifugal force for the people, nearly everything is based off of ethnicity, including political parties. One example of this is a party that's usually in power, the People's Democratic Party, the PDP. This party's base is primarily in the south, and the fact that it's composed mainly of Igbo and Yoruba peoples. This was the party that President Goodluck Jonathan ran on, and won. The opposition to the PDP is the APC, whose base is primarily in the north and consists of Hausa Fulani. This was the party that President Muhammadu Buhari ran under. There are multiple other parties, but almost all of them are based on an ethnic basis, and not anything else. Usually religion, but only ethnic. Multiple cleavages exist in Nigeria, and so we need to cover those as well. One of the main cleavages in Nigeria is the rich and poor gap. When the British first colonized Nigeria and turned it into a rentier state, they instituted multiple developments in the port city of Lagos and to some extent the Niger Delta. This led to some people consolidating power and growing in wealth, while many others grew poor. But this does not only apply in the south. When the British took control of Nigeria and gained it by the Berlin Conference, they did not develop things as much in the north as they did in the south. because they thought to themselves that the north was completely worthless, as it had nearly no natural resources within it. Thus, the rich-poor gap continues to exist, with most of the Nigerian GDP concentrated in the south than the north. Religion also plays a major role in the cleavages, as we can see from Nigerian politics that 50% of Nigeria is Muslim, 40% is Christian, and 10%, which usually live in the center area, follow animist religions. This is because of two important phenomena: the Muslims taking control of Nigeria, and the British colonizing Nigeria. When the Muslims took control of Nigeria and started spreading Islam, they weren't able to completely penetrate Nigeria's south. As such, they mainly just took control of the north. And nowadays, most of the north is primarily Muslim. In the south, however, the British did not advance as far upwards as did the Muslims advance south, because they thought that up in the north there was nothing of value. As such, the British left their influence and their religion mainly in the south, and this is why most of the Christians of Nigeria are concentrated in the southern parts of Nigeria. Women also play an extremely important role in politics. They can form multiple interest groups to get what they want, and they are often the forefront of many protests. An example of this is the protest for the release of the Chibok girls who were captured on April 14, 2014 by radical Boko Haram members. The forefront of this protest were women who wanted to see that these girls were released. And as such, women in Nigeria have extremely high political clout and political efficacy. Multiple NGOs also exist in Nigeria because of the fact that many political scientists have said that weak governments often lead to strong civil societies, and strong governments or authoritarian governments often lead to weaker civil societies. We can see this in all 6 countries we study in AP Comparative. In countries such as China and Russia, where the government is relatively strong and authoritarian, civil society is weak. Whereas in countries where the government is relatively weak, like Mexico and Nigeria, civil society is at an all-time high. An example of an NGO that exists in Nigeria is MEN, the Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta. While this is a militant group who seeks militant goals, it is nonetheless an NGO, in the fact that it persuades foreign companies, often through military violence, to limit their influence on the Niger Delta and to so-called emancipate it from the rule of the British. MEN has taken to multiple tactics to achieve these goals, including bombing of foreign oil companies, taking over oil rigs by force, and even in one scenario, bringing in women to sit on the oil rigs so that the workers could not work on the rigs. Part of their efforts have been successful, and some foreign companies, though not all, have removed some influence over the Niger Delta. Another important NGO in Nigeria that's not on this PowerPoint is the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, or MOSAP. This challenges the government's revenue-sharing formulas and aims to combat corruption in the central government. There are also other NGOs that target specific cleavages, specifically women's rights campaigns, worker unions, labor unions, teacher unions, and the like. After the Fourth Republic, which took place in 1999, the media has been completely and almost free from the government's control, although there are still some outlets that are funded in part or in whole by the government, like This plays a large role in Nigerian civil society, in that it connects the Nigerians together and acts like a centripetal force with the Nigerians. In addition to unifying the country, it also educates people about what's going on around the country, and it helps bring awareness to certain issues like the kidnapping of the Chibok girls on April 14th. There are multiple privately owned outlets in Nigeria, including over 100 newspapers, multiple radio and TV stations across the country. that cover a wide range of topics. Education in Nigeria plays a somewhat high role, but not as high. The overall literacy rate in Nigeria is around 70%, which is lower than most of the other countries, but it's even lower for Nigerian women, at around 68 to 67% for women. However, Nigerians still place a high importance on education, as there are many private and public schools across the country, both in the north and in the south. However, BP and other companies in the Niger Delta, when they invested in this area, they didn't build schools or hospitals in the Niger Delta area, leading to some of men's demands. Political efficacy of the Nigerians are somewhat high, but not as high as other states. Nigerians often form interest groups and protest to combat social and political issues within their country, as can be seen with the Chiba girls' kidnapping. Alongside that, interest groups can often go above and beyond in combating social and political issues. Many vigilante groups in the north have taken to combating Boko Haram's influence by being vigilantes, going out and hunting down Boko Haram members and rescuing victims that fled from the clutches of Boko Haram. The political culture of Nigeria is unique in that it's marked by a few things that are not found in any other country. For one, the multiple military coups, over 7 or 8 that Nigeria has seen, has degraded the Nigerian people to the point that they reject the concept of military rule altogether, and instead they support democracy and democratic leaders altogether. This can be seen mostly in 2015, where the first ever peaceful handout, or one of the best handdowns of political power from President Goodluck Jonathan to President Muhammadu Buhari took place. Nigerians are also opposed to single-party dominance, and they fear that if the rule of the minority comes, the majority won't get their voice heard. This can be seen in the 1999 Nigerian Constitution, which gave the presidential election system its legitimacy that it has today, and the fact that it has a 2-round system whereby the president, now, in addition to having the majority vote, must also have 2/3 of the vote, must also have 25% of the vote in 2/3 of the states. However, corruption still exists in Nigeria, and Nigerians hate it. As a matter of fact, President Muhammadu Buhari, even though he was a military dictator in the past, came into power on an anti-corruption platform, and he claimed that he could fix the corruption problem in Nigeria. We can see from this, Nigerians hate corruption, but they still acknowledge that it exists in almost every single level of government, in almost every single form imaginable, from prebendalism to patron clientelism to just plain bribery as well. Only time will tell whether or not President Muhammadu Buhari will fulfill his goals. But with that, we have come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and I may probably see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.